Virtual Console. The Virtual Console was available on the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS, where you could buy older video games for modern platforms. The Wii had the NES, SNES, Nintendo 64, Arcade, Master System, Mega Drive, Commodore 64, MSX, TurboGrafx 16, and the Neo Geo AES.
Have you heard of almost half of these consoles?
This was back when the Wii was attempting to be like the ultimate Nintendo console, so you could play every Wii game, almost every GameCube game, and legacy titles from several platforms that some of them weren't even Nintendo. Some great games are available, like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and more, but there are many weird exclusions. On the Nintendo 64, out of the 3 Mario Party games, only Mario Party 2 was available. The emulation of these consoles was fantastic on the Wii, alongside a great controller to go with it. See, with most of these consoles, the controller they originally used for the game had a lot more buttons, so Nintendo created the Classic Controller. The Classic Controller takes after an SNES controller, but with 2 joysticks in order to also work with the Nintendo 64. For some reason you couldn't use the GameCube controllers for these games, which was always annoying, but the Classic Controller was a great way to play these games. A bit of a bonus is if you have an SNES Mini, you can use these controllers on the Wii to play the SNES games the best way possible. But if you also own an SNES Mini, you could just play the games on the SNES Mini. The 3DS. The 3DS had a bit of a different virtual console, alongside re-releasing games in different ways. Nintendo had 3D Classics, a way to play some of their older games with 3D, alongside Sega doing pretty much the same thing. But these weren't really emulation, so they kinda don't count. When it came to Virtual Console, Nintendo focused more on its handheld history, all starting when they cut the price of the 3DS down from unaffordable to somewhat affordable, and gave away 10 free NES games and 10 free Game Boy Advance games. The NES games are emulated, no doubt about it, but the Game Boy Advance games are truly interesting. If you don't remember, the DS and DS Lite had a Game Boy Advance slot, and directly had the parts to run a Game Boy Advance game, but when the DSi came out, they got rid of that slot. However, they never actually got rid of the ability to play Game Boy Advance games. The DSi still has the capability to play Game Boy Advance games, therefore the 3DS also still has the capability to play Game Boy Advance games. So the games available here are just the digital files for the games on the 3DS, the same way you'd buy a 3DS retail game or buy a DSiWare game on the 3DS, making it technically not emulation. The 3DS is capable of Game Boy Advance emulation through hacking, but I guess if it's easier to do it without emulation, you may as well.
I think this is why Game Boy Advance games just weren't available on the eShop, because it was just too difficult to figure out this not emulation but sort of emulation method of having them available in the first place.
The 3DS had NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Gear, TurboGrafx 16, and SNES Virtual Console. However, the SNES games were available exclusively on the new 3DS, as the old 3DS couldn't handle SNES games. What? Yeah, the old 3DS is perfectly capable of playing the SNES, and it works pretty well too. Maybe Nintendo really wanted something to sell the new 3DS, or hackers could do what Nintendo don't. Of course, the big selling point of Virtual Console on the 3DS was the Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. This is actually the very first way I played Super Mario Land and so many other classics. Heaps, and I mean heaps, of Game Boy games were available on the 3DS and worked perfectly. There was even the introduction of save states, which means you can finally save, die, and go back to where you were before. This makes games like Super Mario Land so much easier. The 3DS is actually the console with the most amount of individual Mario games to play, with there being 101. So obviously, this is where Virtual Console peaked.
But after every peak, there must be a downfall.
Did the Wii U do anything right?
Yeah, nah.
The Wii U had NES, SNES, Nintendo 64, TurboGrafx 16, MSX, Game Boy Advance, and DS. The Nintendo 64 games looked horrendous on the Wii U, with it being incredibly dark on the console. But the Wii U having Game Boy Advance and DS games was incredible. DS games being available on the Wii U? What a perfect console to have them on! The Wii U has 2 screens, just like the DS. So you can make one screen the TV and one screen the bottom. It's just incredible. And to make it even better, you could just play the Virtual Console games on the Wii to fix the weird issues they have on the Wii U. You could also buy several Wii games on the eShop, but they couldn't work out whether they counted as Virtual Console games or not, but they're not emulated. They're the same way the Game Boy Advance games work on the 3DS.